I'm here with, oh my God, I want to say Dorothy Gale now. I'm here with Laura Gale, the author of Hare and Tortoise Race Across Israel. This is the Book of Life. I'm Heidi Estrin. Hare and Tortoise Race Across Israel makes me happy. It's a fun picture book set in Israel that has a plot beyond Whirlwind Tour, and the illustrations are modern and sophisticated. So I was glad to bump into author Laura Gale at the 2015 Association of Jewish Libraries Conference in Silver Spring, Maryland. I'm here with Laura Gale, the author of Hare and Tortoise Race Across Israel. So tell a little bit about how you came to write this book.
Well, I definitely never planned to write a book about Israel. I have actually never been to Israel myself, although I very much want to go and bring my own children to Israel with me. But I was interested in how much my son gravitated toward a book called Hare and Tortoise Race to the Moon. He loved that book, and I started thinking in the back of my mind, what if Hare and Tortoise went to Israel? And I just couldn't get the thought out of my mind. It just kept kind of bouncing around in my brain. I just thought it was such an approachable way to introduce children to Israel because they all know the story of Hare and Tortoise, and they all love the story because they love how Hare kind of gets his comeuppance, and so it just gives what might be an unfamiliar country to a lot of children this familiar feel. And I also just thought the concept of a race across the country would give me the opportunity to highlight a lot of different parts of Israel.
Before you wrote your story set in Israel, had you read many other children's books that take place in Israel? And how do you think yours fits in or contrasts with the rest of that genre?
So I had read some stories with my children, including Dinosaur's Trip to Israel and Sammy Spider's Trip to Israel and Engineer Ari and the Rosh Hashanah Ride. I'd read all of those with my children because until I can bring them to Israel, I feel like Israeli-themed children's books are the next best thing. Honestly, when I was writing mine, I didn't even think at all about trying to make sure I was highlighting different places or that I was making mine stand out. I was just very focused on Hare and Tortoise, their best friends. I wanted them to live in Tel Aviv because it was conveniently located on one side of the country. And then I just sort of went from there, imagining their route and where they might go and what would interest them and what would interest kids. My book draws upon some cultural and geographic highlights more than kind of the touristy highlights, which you often see in other books. And I did not go into any religious sites, so that is something that is different. Hare and Tortoise are not necessarily Jewish, although we might assume that they're Jewish. One thing that I was very focused on was trying to write a book that had no political message at all. But the funny thing is that even though that was one of my main goals, because the publisher decided to include a map in the back of the book, and it's just interesting because by having a map, you are automatically making a political statement. And a parent did ask me recently, your map kind of makes it look like the West Bank is part of Israel. And it really hit home that I'm not sure it is possible to have a book about Israel that's not political at this point. And that's not something that little kids are going to be picking up on, but it is certainly something that their parents are going to be picking up on. As much as we want to have books about Israel that can just present the positives of Israel without bringing in any of the conflict or any of the negatives, as soon as you start talking about Israel, it really is political. And I guess it was kind of a pipe dream to think I could write a book about Israel that would have no political statement or ramifications.
Maybe not saying something is the same as saying something.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think just by introducing your kids to Israel, you are opening up future conversations that are going to be difficult, and we need to have those conversations with our kids, and we can't avoid them. And we're going to have to figure out what we want to tell our kids and how to let them come to their own opinions, and it's a very tricky thing for any parent, but it's something that every Jewish parent has to do at some point.
Well, your publisher, Joni Sussman, said in your session this morning something interesting about that map. She was saying that she was happy that they caught in time the dotted line that goes across the map to show where Hare and Tortoise are racing, to make sure that it skirted around rather than cut through the West Bank, because it would be a very different story if they did go straight through.
Yeah, it was interesting to me also to hear Joni say that they had considered that and just made sure that Hare and Tortoise went around, but I did actually want to ask her, and I didn't have a chance, whether they considered putting in a line showing where the West Bank is.
Well, what I particularly liked about this book was that it's not just a whirlwind tour by somebody who flew to Israel and they look around for a while and then they leave again, which is the storyline for many of the picture books about Israel. So the fact that the characters live there, and that while it is something of a whirlwind tour, they're not doing it in order to take a tour and see the sights. They just happen to be passing through a variety of places. So I like that difference. So talk a little bit about how you decided what to include in terms of where the race would take them.
Well, I was thinking of the kids first who would be reading the book, and so within Tel Aviv I included the beach, and I included a museum, and I included a performance, because those are the kinds of things that I do with my kids and that they enjoy. And then we had a lot of food in the book, because that is something that I've always been drawn to myself in books, that I think is a good way for kids to connect to another culture. And so putting Hare at the market was a logical thing for him to do in Jerusalem. And then my kids are completely sports obsessed, so I had them watching a soccer game in Independence Park, because again, that's something that I thought most kids would probably relate to, and street performers in Jerusalem as well. You know, any kid would love to stop and watch the street performers. It really appealed to me that taking breaks in the race were taking breaks in order to enjoy these highlights of Israel's culture. Then, you know, the desert, I think it is magical to any kid, so that seemed like an obvious choice to include. And I chose to end the race at the Dead Sea because from the first time I heard about this place with the super salty water where things can float more easily, I was completely entranced, and I didn't hear about it until I was far past picture book age. So I figured if I, as a teenager or young adult, had such a visceral reaction to the Dead Sea, that surely young kids would feel the same way. So really I was just thinking of my own children and of myself as a child and what I thought I would have reacted most strongly to, and tried to kind of have Hare and Tortoise wend their way through Israel along the lines of those types of attractions.
The illustrations are very contemporary, which is another nice thing about this book. As Joni Sussman pointed out, they are not those sort of traditional blocky golden pictures that you tend to see in Israel stories. I know that authors and illustrators don't get to plan these things ahead together, and you may have been surprised by what you found. So what was your response when you first saw the illustrations?
I loved them from the moment I saw them, and as you said, it's a very muted palette. It is not the pinks and golds and bright blues that we often see in books set in Israel. The illustrations also have very beautiful lines and shapes. Sarah just did such an amazing job she also gave Hare and Tortoise themselves a very contemporary look. They look nothing like the Hare and Tortoise in any version of the fable that I've ever seen. So I really loved the illustrations, but it's something that, as you said, is such a funny part of the children's book business that most readers are unaware of, that you have no control over the illustrations, and that at best you maybe can suggest they change some little detail, but often, as in the case of this book, I did not even see the illustrations until they were finalized. And sometimes I think about how hard it must be for an author if they don't like the illustrations. You know, you're giving someone your baby and then they're tattooing it, and there's just nothing you can do about it. And that did recently happen to a friend of mine, where she just was not at all happy with the way the illustrations for her latest book came out. And you know, it is what it is. But in this case, I was thrilled. I think that she really added a lot to the story with her beautiful artwork.
Are you working on a new book?
I am always working on many new books at any given time. I am working on picture books. I'm working on books for older readers. I'm working on fiction. I'm working on nonfiction. So many books are in the works. I have a series of books coming out in 2016 and 2017 for very little kids, featuring a pair of chicken sisters that start with one chicken who doesn't want to hatch and the other chicken gently trying to encourage her to come out even though she's scared, and then the other books follow the same adventures. But yeah, I am always working on multiple projects.
Do you have any more Jewish books in the works?
I have a Shabbat book that I've been working on. It's with my agent now, and we hope to find a publisher for that one soon. And I've been working on a chapter book with a Jewish main character, just dealing with the same kinds of things that every teenager of any religion deals with. Or I guess she's really a tween. She's 12. So yes, among the many projects I am always working on, I always have Jewish projects, and they for sure have a special place in my heart.
Great. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you would like to talk about?
Well, I think that for any teachers or librarians who might be listening, anyone who's interested in using a book in a school or classroom or synagogue setting to teach kids about the process of writing, that it is so easy for kids to generate their own ideas by starting with a story that they already know, just like I did here in Hare and Tortoise. And that's something that I love talking to kids about, and I love seeing all the crazy, goofy ideas they come up with. And you can start with any story. So, you know, I'll say, okay, take Goldilocks and the Three Bears and just take out the bears and put in some new characters, and they'll come up with Goldilocks and the Three Cicadas, or Goldilocks and the Three Giants, or Goldilocks and the Three Aliens. They'll just have so many ideas. Every hand in the room will be shooting up. Even if the teacher had asked me previously, you know, I can't get my kids to think of ideas, how can you help me? As soon as you're starting with a known story, all of a sudden it's so easy for them. It just gives them this gateway to generate their own ideas. And so, like I said, they can change the characters. They can also change the setting, like I did with Hare and Tortoise. And that's also something that they find really fun. Take the three little pigs, and they could set them in the desert, and what kind of houses would they build there? Or you could have them in Alaska, or you could have them at the bottom of the sea, building out of sea glass and stones, and their imaginations are so limitless, and sometimes kids just don't know how to open that door to tap into all of those ideas that are there. And so when you just say, start with this story and change it, all of a sudden all of the ideas come flooding out. And so I think that this book can be one of many that teachers and librarians can use just to show kids that that's allowed. You're allowed to take a story you already know and change it, and it can become your own original story, and to use that as a way to start the brainstorming process.
Okay, well, thank you so much for speaking with me.
Thank you. It was really fun.
If you enjoy the Book of Life podcast, please become a patron at Patreon. patreon.com/bookoflife, leave a review on iTunes, or a comment on our blog at bookoflifepodcast.com. You can also like our page at facebook.com/bookoflifepodcast, follow us at twitter.com/bookoflifepod, email us at bookoflifepodcast@gmail.com, or leave us a voicemail at 561-206-2473. The Book of Life is a podcast service of the Feldman Library at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida, at cbiboca.org, and is supported in part by the Association of Jewish Libraries at jewishlibraries.org. Our background music is provided by the Freilach Makers Klezmer String Band. Thanks for listening, and happy reading.